about 2 hours north of here, town of Roqua, and Carl's on the other side of the river.
About 40 minutes.
So, kind of a little background. Right now, currently at my place, got 200 acres, 110 head of adult cattle, doing cow-calf yearlings, organic strawberries. We have greenhouses, pigs, chickens, and stuff like that. And direct marketing business with the pork and the beef. So, but yeah, I guess we'll start on here. Covered crops, kind of going through the management, species, the different. Then moving on to the next one, cover crops, soil health. What are we getting out of the biology, fertility, nutrient cycling, management. Would be your soil health, your principles of it. Feeding the livestock, soils, together at the same time. Putting intentional species out there, ones that are better adapted for the biodiversity, achieve, a diversified outcome, improve farm income, sustainability, healing of the soil, and improve economics.
And the 30-year message part is Justin is doing it on his farm. I've worked with cover crops and soil health and forages for the last 30 years. And that's just kind of the advancement of how cover crops improve soils and how the value can be tangible.
Kind of just lays out here the difference between forage and the cover crop. In the forage, you're going to have everything on the right here from erosion control, nutrient cycling, compaction, feeding biology, and depending on which one is your main goal, some are more than others. As far as from a forage standpoint, we can go least diverse, more diverse, really kind of tailoring it to the farm's needs. Some places, keeping it simple is better than going too diverse on how we want to manage it and take care of it.
So how many here are livestock producers? How many here work with livestock producers? Okay. So what we're trying to establish is cover crops. Everything they do on that right-hand side, we can do that plus with livestock. I think livestock is a very important part of soil care, soil health. Integrating livestock just kind of rounds the soil care part of what we're trying to do with the soils. So if you have land, you don't have cows, I know people that do.
Here's some costs that we kind of put together. Grazing cover crops, your seeding rates need to be higher. You're in the $35 to $70 an acre. Your planting time is greatly going to affect yield. In either one. Either if you're planted later, it's going to be more kind of supplementing corn residue, stuff like that. If you're planting earlier, you're going to have obviously have more tonnage, higher returns, longer grazing. Planting the cover crops in this part of the region after your small grains is your biggest return there. And you're just for a cover crop, lot lower seeding rate, reflects in the cheaper per acre. Same again, the planting date is going to affect the effectiveness of that cover crop.
So you'll notice on both sides it says consider wider rotations. How many are actively farming? What are your rotations? You look at Iowa and a lot of Wisconsin, and it is corn and beans. And it seems like you get into Iowa and start moving west, it's corn, beans. Integration of small grains is your quantum leap year for soil health. So whether that be oats or wheat or barley, that just gives you so much more time for your cover crop to do what it's going to do, to root down, to exchange the root exudates, to help restructure and build that soil. So our encouragement, especially, you look at southwest Wisconsin and you look at northeast Iowa, Yeah, we are made for being able to put in small grains. If you're a livestock producer, you can feed it. If you need the straw, you have bedding. And then you also have from August until October for growth of a cover crop, for it to be able to, like I said, express itself and actually build the soils more than planting one in October and not getting very little growth. That's better than nothing. But our quantum leap year, everybody knows what a quantum leap is. That's when you can accelerate something fast. That's the timing that we can do that through cover crops.
One quick question for
Sure.
you, which never heard a term this way before, but grazing cover crops, you do want to see at a heavier rate.
Go ahead.
Well, we're in a situation like this coming in. There's a mix that I use a lot called BioD 16 weight. You want to plant that at a lower rate just so everything can express itself. In a grazing mix, so we could use BioD as part of that mix, but it's going to be heavier grass, oats, sorghum, stan. That's where you're going to get a heavier seeding rate.
And you will also, you'll have higher forage yields.
Would you pick it up with the cattle?
Which you pick it up with the value of the cattle.
Grazing.
The below ground livestock are going to benefit, but also, here's the way I look at things. We're going to spend $35 to $70 an acre, or $15 to $50. This is horrible, but what's my return on the investment? And we're going to spend a little more in order to have a higher forage yield for the livestock production, because that is our key enterprise that's bringing immediate money back in.
How far down was that slide?
Long ways. You're going the wrong way.
So more than the
Keep going.
value with the cattle, more than pays for the extra $20 an acre.
Yeah. And timing is pretty critical on that.
Well, this one touched on your costs. That
Sorry about this. So when you have that higher seeding rate, where we were going with that, and that additional dollar, the earlier that we can get it in there, the more yield, the more forage we're going to get. And that gives a higher return on that investment. Soil health and livestock production. We're going to just slip through some of these pretty quickly. We're just looking at soil health and what that does in that soil. Has anybody ever seen the diagram to the left? That's the ideal soil, where we'd have 25% air, we'd have 25% water, 45 or 50% of it's going to be mineralization plus organic matter. What we want the cover crops for in that is to help maintain that structure so that it can hold that air. Because what does biology in the soil need? It needs air to breathe. It needs food, something to feed on. That's your roots. It needs moisture, but not excess and not too dry. And that's where the cover crops come in. They'll help to structure that soil so that you have those air pockets for that water and for that air to be in that soil. It's kind of like that crumbly, and we'll show pictures of that crumbly soil, that we can have that better balance. If you have compaction or a lot of tillage, you're compressing that, and what are you shoving out when you're compressing that? You're compressing out the air and the ability for that water or that soil to hold water. So that's why we want that structure to it, that granulation in that soil.
one of the principles here, what do we do to the soil? Chemical disturbance, physical disturbance, biological disturbance. Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, no matter what our farming type is, we're disturbing. We're always doing disturbance of that soil. So if we're organic, right, we're not putting any chemicals on, but what are we doing? We're doing more tillage. So we're doing that physical disturbance. Physical disturbance would be the tillage coming through. Chemical would be, I'm not tilling it, so I'm doing great, right? But you're spraying, the herbicides on. It's just kind of, in my opinion, just a little bit of a fact of life. You're gonna be disturbing that soil. So what do we do to help maintain that soil care, that soil health? That's where the cover crops come in. If it's possible, if you're certified organic, I always joke and call it recreational tillage. Just don't be going out just to till and watch the diesel go up in the air. Be intentional about what you're doing. If I'm spraying, and I'm no-till, but I'm spraying, I want to make sure that my timing and I'm doing things intentionally there too. So I'm not constantly tilling. I get to other parts of the country and I swear in Kentucky and in Kansas, running the spray rig is a hobby. They're constantly going out and spraying for this or for that. And if they could get rotations in check, and that's why we're working with farms down there, get rotations in check and get cover crops incorporated, they find out they don't have to make as many trips. In Montana, we're working with farms out there in the dryland. They get 10 acres, so every other year they leave the ground fallow. Farms out there typically go and they spray 4 or 5 times to keep the weeds down. And what we found was they might go out and they might spray the weeds out once, and then they put in a cover crop, and that's giving some natural shade, and they don't have to spray again the rest of the summer. It improves the soil structure, improves the health, retains moisture for them because they only get 10 inches of rain, and it reduces their costs because every time they go out and spray it, there's a cost to it. So there's a lot of value benefits to being able to try to incorporate that.
Oh, an important step here. The biggest one, with row crop, planning ahead with your herbicide program as far as herbicide carryover. Not thinking about that, we can go out and plant something in the fall, and some of these carryovers are 12 to 18 months. Stop germination and stop things from growing properly. So something we really got to watch there. Trying to plan ahead, when the combine's taking the oats or the wheat off, make sure we got the drill ready. So, every week just really adds up as far as the cover crop growth or the grazing growth. Different windows. You can plant oats really early in the spring as soon as you can get across. You plant it to a green. Your small grains after soybeans and corn. Interseeding after silage. Lots of different places we can incorporate it into your plan. Biggest thing here, plan ahead and have an action plan. Don't call your seed dealer the day before and say you need seed. So,
Never had that happen.
No.
I just had that happen.
Yeah. Planning ahead for termination the following spring. Mother Nature's always going to throw a wrench in there. It could be rainy, it could be dry. Have an action plan, be ready. If it's, plowing or if it's spraying, just be ready in case you have to 2 weeks earlier. So.
How much are you using drones now for that timing of the application?
A lot more. I don't know exactly how much people are using drones, but drones are a game changer, in my opinion, because they can do the timing. They can get closer to the crop to get the seed distributed better. Dubuque County, I told somebody, I think we've got 4 people that are running drones, but they're each running 3 or 4 or 5. And they can get a lot of ground covered, but they're right there. They can do it when the timing's right, because interseeding in the fall, the timing's got to be right. You can't do it too soon, or the cover crop doesn't grow. Or it'll sprout, and then you can shake it out. And you do it too late, and then you're at the mercy of moisture and fall weather. So
Yeah, I think there's huge potential for it. Not in the covered crops. These guys are spraying fence rows. It's just the technology is just phenomenal. Interseeding, our last speaker that we had here for the Cincinnati event up from Canada, Steve Kenyon, he's got one. He's interseeding a head of cattle into this tall forage, with the clovers and stuff. So some of this ground, like in his country, was way too rough to drive out there. Send a drone out, So
the picture on the left, I took this out of fun with one of our other guys that we work with because we work with sorghums. But I looked at that picture and I said, to the left's what everybody expects or desires their cover crop or their forage to look like. When in reality, sometimes weather events occur or our planting time makes a big difference. You can't plant that on the left in October and expect it to ever get like that, right? So the one on the right actually is down in Kansas in dry weather in conditions. You can see a better cover crop, but on either side of that strip, but we put in strips of different cover crops to see what would work and what would not work. So we got to look at where we live and plant an appropriate, species. We'll still hit all the boxes that we're going to hit here in a second, but that wasn't a failure. Just let us know, don't plant that at that time.
what do you have in this slide here that you put together?
So I and all of us, I believe, in the cover crops, I like mixtures, and we're going to get into the different species here in just a second. But what we find when we have mixtures of different types of plants, so your grasses, your broadleaves, your warm season, your cool season, can you see how that structured granulization there is on the left side, that Terra Life mix? I can't see if that picture is clear enough. But to the right is just, mustard is a good cover crop, but that's it by itself, and you can see more blockiness. We're not putting out the root exudates that are feeding the biology in order to help restructure, reglue that soil into structure. So that just to me was a great example of why we want mixes, why we want to have that diversity out there.
Go ahead.
There's also some cover crops, as I understand it, that if you have a nematode problem, you would plant X. You got that thing too going on, right?
Mustard is one of those that would be considered to help suppress types of nematodes. There's good nematodes and bad nematodes. So it is one that they will use. But we would go with a mix that's stronger in mustard, but we still want everything else, or we haven't done our job. We've worked on nematodes, but we haven't worked on the rest, if that makes sense.
Just some pictures here of diverse mixes that we have out here at the fields of Cincinnati.
This was actually last year, and Rick Bieber, and I'm gonna steal some of his verbiage because I like his 5 soil care, not soil health, soil care principles, which is on that banner out in the main lobby. But this is going to go into corn, and if you look closely, and you were at this plot, you're not going to see a lot of legumes in the mixes that he's recommending. He wants more broadleaves. We want the grasses. We want the broadleaves. We want a little less legume. Legumes help, basically, are a nitrogen source after you terminate them. So if you're planting corn, one would think that I need a lot of legumes in there, right? A lot of nitrogen, because corn takes a lot of nitrogen. When in reality, we're finding that soil health, that soil structure, if we have more broadleaves, we still want some legumes in there, but we have more broadleaves, we're achieving the same thing, but also helping even a little more on the structure. Because if we get too many legumes in a cover crop mix, we might as well go out and just throw nitrogen out there, purchase nitrogen. We're not helping 100% on the soil care side of it. So that was one of the pictures that I really like we have a good amount of brassicas, and a lot of that is sunflowers. And
Too
that-
much nitrogen will actually lock up the soil
Yeah, tight.
and overload the microbes with nitrogen.
So it's just like putting a big bunch of rotten nitrogen.
Here we just go through the 4 plant families, or the 4, your cool season, your warm season grasses, cool season broadleaf, warm season broadleaf. Throughout these categories, depending on your planting timing, if you're going to graze it or cover crop, and also using stuff that's, say, regionally appropriate to what you're trying to get out of it.
Right, and I would like, in every one of my cover crop mixes, I would like to have at least one out of each of these categories. That would be bare minimum. So corn is what? It's a warm season grass. So for sure, I want to make sure that I have a cool season grass in there. I want a cool season broadleaf and a warm season broadleaf. And then comes the question, well, there's certain times of the year where if you plant either warm season or cool season, it's not going to get very big and die. But even in the fall, if we plant, let's say, millet, and it only gets 2 or 3 inches tall, it's still putting down roots, and it's still putting out signals into that soil. It's still putting out some root exudates to where it helps set up for the next year's crop. We would go a lot stronger on the cool season grasses, but I still want just a little bit of that warm season in the mix. We can slide through a couple of these fairly fast, unless livestock producers, you got questions.
So I guess getting into these next couple slides, these are ones that really hit home for me. Getting around, like you'll tell a customer, somebody, hey, plant this depth. They'll set their drill and they just go. Depending on your residue, soil conditions. When we say seeding depth, that's the placement of the seed, not where to set the drill.
So if you look at that, can you point out the seed?
Well, you can see this.
With your pointer, yeah.
Right, well, this seed here, then you can see this seed's all laying on top of the ground here.
So this farm said he went in and no-tilled in some cover crop into his alfalfa stand that was thinning. I said, cool. He said, well, I'm not sure about that. So when you look at that, this is exactly how it looked looking down at it. When he put his drill in the ground and was pulling it through, his drill made that slot because the seed drops down seed, but it didn't close it up. And what I asked the farms, I said, if you're planting corn, would you just make a slot and then drop your corn in there? No. You don't have that soil seed contact. You get a 1/10 of an inch of rain, and it sprouts it like this one, but then there's no moisture to get it the rest of the way. So essentially what I see is a lot of farms that are throwing money out the window because their drills are not doing the job. They think they're no-till drills, but they're not no-till drills. Terry?
I promoted the Atchison drill for years, and everybody went and bought a no-till drill, thought all drills were created equal.
Yeah.
We're just the ignorance out there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's the ignorance of farmers and cover crops is so bad. I want to express. I've got mine for sale. I'm going to sell it. I have one guy that runs it a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is the most perfect seed placement drill on the market today.
I did not have a chance to update these slides, but it would have been the same thing. But this farm actually got a no-till drill, and you can actually see all the seed that came up. You can grow it, it works, but you gotta get that soil seed contact, get it up and growing. This is just a good example of Dennis Round, if anybody knows him. He spent a couple of years working on his drill a little bit every year because of the cost, but he got himself equipped to where he has a very good no-till drill. You can see it's got all the parts next to it, because your drill drops the seed down in the trench, and then we got to close the trench, and then this piece right here, I call it a spider wheel. It literally crumbles the soil around that seed, so it's just like planting it in your garden. It allows that soil seed contact, the ability to hold moisture, and he's getting good stands with his drill. And that's what the slide before, the guy he's gone to something like this, taken their drill and actually updated it to be no-till.
Planting depth here, based on seed size. You can easily see here, kind of what we talked about. Some of these here, depending on soil conditions, you might have to set a hair deeper, so that trench fills in, so you get it covered up.
And if you plant these at this depth, you're going to see this and not very much of that. So that's why that planting, you've got to look at what your farm is planting and then get closer to the shallower. If you've got a mix of big seed and little seed, you're going to be planting a little bit shallow. Here's the reason.
Yeah, visual pictures.
At meetings, how deep do you plant corn? Anybody know? What's the proper depth for planting corn?
Fancy 5/8.
Wrong.
2.5 inches.
2.5 inches.
3 inches.
Sorry, Terry. I know his way. 2.5 inches. Structurally, physiologically, that's the ideal depth.
They should be planted at 1.5 inches.
What's that?
You should plant it at 1.5 inches.
You could, but I won't get too far in the weeds, but your first 5 nodes are your main root system. If you plant too shallow, some of those aren't in the soil, and that's why we have smaller ears and smaller plants. But look at this little seed. That's a Timothy seed. If you plant it at this depth, you can visually see it doesn't have the energy to get out that depth. And here's the results. Same mix. A lot of sorghum and millets and brassicas. Over here, this farm was not going very deep, so he's got all the small seed. He was only going at soil surface, so he didn't get the grasses. And this one, he planted a little too deep, so he didn't have the brassicas. So you need to be able to adjust how deep you're planting.
So then when you got a 16 mix, are you throwing some of your seed away?
Go back 2 slides. Short answer, in an ideal world, I would have you split out, and I have farms that do that. Small seed, big seed. They plant their big seed in the oats box, and they plant their small seed in the alfalfa box. So it's got to be the types that'll feed through there. But if you have one big mix, and that's what a lot of people choose, we're going to want to be somewhere around that 1/2 inch. You might.
So then in your 16-inch mix, if you got barley and oats and you're putting in a 1/2 inch,
As long as we got moisture on those, we're fine. Corn is not. Corn would not work at that.
But you're recommending that your drill's got both
I would, yeah.
the big box and the small box.
A lot of our cover croppers, the ones that are doing big acres, are splitting it out, small seed, big seed. I would
aren't they
recommend
still
that.
dropping it in the same?
Well, a lot of
You're
times
changing your depth, and you're cutting your trench, dropping both those seeds in, and you
Let's-
different boxes.
Go back one, correct. So what they need to do, next one, where your drops are, they're going to be dropping it in front, not in the trench, with the small seed.
they would
Drop it on the soil surface.
pulling these hoses out of there.
So the little box up front here, the alfalfa box, those tubes are going down. They're not going down in the trench.
But most planters are set up to go all in the trench.
So then you got to err on one side or the other. That's the problem.
But you are selling a mix at 16 and everything's in it, so it's
Within that mix, if you add up
We got it.
the barley, oats, you're almost close to 30% and those will help bust that seed trench open and allow
So
for the small stuff to come through. There is some room for error in there.
And you could function,
Okay.
look at water or, you know, the environment too, to help change that.
Yeah.
You got rain coming, not coming.
And I just had used this one just showing the effects of planting depth on the structure of plants. These are actually the same plant. These are both Barcant turnips. This one was flown on, which is what they have to do. This one was drilled. This one, that small seed on top of the soil surface, that's why I like drilling if we can, but we can't always. It has to get enough moisture, and it starts growing out, and then it has to put roots down in the ground, and then it has to wiggle and put roots down and build top, and it takes longer, about 2 weeks longer, to get a structure put together than if it's planted at the proper depth. Then it can just automatically, it doesn't have to go through all that, and it saves about 2 weeks in the fall of growth because it's that much quicker getting established.
On some mixes, if you just use oats in Nebraska, they like being planted really close to the same depth. If you're using oats and clover and alfalfa, that's a different story.
Yeah, these are tiny seed. Weed pressure. That's why weed pressure has done a lot more damage than people think. These weeds here have a little bit of an allelopathy effect or shading. And then you can see once we got out of the weed area, we had a perfect stand of a cover crop. Yeah.
Steve Wallace years ago made a simple comment for everybody to understand. Look, the bigger the seed, the deeper the depth, the smaller the seed, the closer to the surface.
Right.
Real simple comment.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, with either the small grain out here, if we could be as close as we can to right behind the combine, so when any spillover seed germinates or cover crop is coming at the same time, or if you miss that window, waiting that 10 days, 2 weeks, then if you were conventional, you could do a burn down pass, then plant your cover crops. Otherwise, if you have a lot going through the combine, it will all get choked out by the wheat. You might have to adjust your mix according to different root structures here. This would be a kale plant here, peas here, sorghum sudan here, tillage radish, more sorghum sudan plant family there, sunflowers over here.
Look at the root mass on some of these and how it holds that soil compared to some of the other. But that's exactly why we want that variation, or we want all those different species, is we got a lot of root mass here, and it's going a little deeper. That one's smaller and going down even deeper. And then you look at like the radish there, you've got a taproot going down. So they're all feeding the different soil biology, and they're also all feeding at different depths, so to speak. That's just another picture of that crumbly, structured soil. We were talking about Idaho earlier. This is actually out in Idaho where they shut off the irrigation. The ground gets hard as a brick. When they turn on the irrigation water, you sink to your knees. It's just a really fine clay. This was after the water was shut off for about 3 weeks. Normally that would just be like a brick. And I told the guys, congratulations, you're almost an Iowa structure. You almost got Iowa soil here. But that's what cover crops can do for that soil structure. There's just some mixes.
Here's a Bio-D mix that we touched on a couple times. Here you can see the percent of the oats. You have the bigger stuff versus the smaller stuff in this mix. So you have, even with the cowpea, spring pea, that's a huge percent of the mix here that would help bust that trench open. Yeah, there's a couple of clovers in there, a lot more brassicas in a mix like this than some other standard mixes that'd be high in legumes.
Okay, this is for Jerry.
Which one?
Okay.
What we're doing a lot of for livestock producers, because we want the soil care part of the formula, but we also want grazing. So we come in with our additional grasses, we come in with maybe 10 to 15 pounds of like a sorghum or millet, and then we add, for the soil care part, we add another 5 to 10 pounds. So we're balancing, we're taking care of the soil, and we're feeding our above ground livestock, below ground and above ground at the same time. And it's been working really well. We've tweaked some of the blends, but
Some of these brassicas in here, you can plant early in the spring and they will do multiple grazings throughout the whole year.
just a beautiful picture, isn't it?
This would be a picture. This is kind of what that BioD could do like. You know, Mother Nature is going to dictate how it grows, how it yields.
Yeah, and this is a farm up by Waukon, Iowa. Does anybody know where that's at? Perfect. It's northeast Iowa, so it's north and west of Butte, about an hour and 45 minutes. He plants this thing, and it looks like just a cover crop. He harvests that, and that's his winter feed for his cows on that farm. He'll let it regrow. But when you look at that and you go, cows don't eat sunflowers.
They do.
they do. But also, that regrowth in there, and when he does feed this to the cows, his notice, and it goes with that speaker this morning, his heifers have a shinier coat. They're healthier when they have that diversity and they have that type of a mix.
Another picture of 3 different mixes here. Maize Pro here, BioD, then more clovers.
There's some clovers down the corner. This is Dennis Rounds. He didn't sit in on this one. But he actually added all 3
Yeah,
together.
your clover right here.
He wanted a 30-weight mix. so we put all of those together. And you can see each one of them. You can see the different species in there. So this presentation was originally more for livestock producers, cover crops and livestock producers. But there's so many things that we can do to feed the above ground critters, the cows and sheep, and still work on the soil health, because this will be corn next year. This year it was forage sorghum planted in rows and then a diverse mix in between the rows. And then he grazed his cows on it all winter, so they were outside and healthy. And then the following spring, or this last spring, that goes back into corn. And then he'll do another field this way.
Where is this?
This is over by northwest, or north of Dyersville and east. I don't know how familiar you are, but if you go straight north of Farley, off of Highway 20, north of Farley, he's about 7-8 miles up the road.
Your summer annuals would make a great rotation. Instead of doing a corn, soybean, you could do corn, forage sorghum, or summer annual.
Yeah.
They'll break that rootworm cycle.
Now
More
this
pictures here.
Yeah, just showing what the cover crops is, and it looks like a sorghum field, but when you look down in it, you can see all the other components of it. That's the same field in September.
The forage sorghum doesn't have the prussic acid at frost time, does it?
Yes.
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 Yes. But you just hold them off for a week.
Could you interseed millet? Would that reduce that risk, right?
It would reduce it, but it wouldn't eliminate
It
it.
would eliminate, but the cattle could pick and choose for that week time frame or whatever.
There's a lot less risk there with more of a diverse mix in that.
So if we're talking Greek to anybody, prussic acid is a compound created when the leaves of sorghum bicolor, which is sorghum sedans, all of them, when these leaves freeze, the cell walls rupture and it creates prussic acid, which is like cyanide. So I know it sounds scary. I've never personally, I've grazed it. I've had people call me when their cows are on it during frost, and I haven't seen anybody lose one yet. I always tell them, just take them off. But if there's other things out here that dilutes it down and they don't have the issues, and also when it does that, as it dries up, it dissipates off. It just volatilizes off. So it's only a concern for a pretty short period of time.
Could you approach that with adaptive managed grazing, whatever the fancy word is, where instead of grazing sorghum, you could maybe go at a right angle and maybe have some woods to graze? You know,
Yeah.
I think there's ways you can play with this.
Right.
Give them some options.
Right. And since I don't want to buy anybody's $4,000 cows, I always tell them, just pull them off when it freezes for a week and then put them back on. You're good to go.
This was back to kind of that one of the first slides that talked about the cost here. Putting together, use that higher average $60 seed cost, drill rental, your total here, forage value. If you just did the easy metric here, but being planted on time, you can easily figure that 2 to 3 ton dry matter. If you're in that end of July, first, second week of August, depending on where you live, this, in my opinion, is very reasonable to do down here.
So those that like to do math in the back and critique the speaker, 60 plus 20 is only 80. I'm always a cautious person. I don't want to overstate. So I added a little more to the cost. Let's say we had to get fencing or, step in posts. So let's just add to it. And if our inputs are higher, we still have a value of $150 a ton feed value to where we're getting a return on our investment for doing a good thing. And the sooner you can do it, the more value you can pull off of it. And I base that off of research done by University of Missouri, Sayre, and other universities.
Any questions on this? Any experience people want to share? I guess, in summary, the biggest thing is the mindset, in my opinion. It's not always going to work out perfect. Biggest thing is planning and having that thought process that it's going to, we want it to succeed. Adjusting the program as far as the cover crop to where you live, regional, stuff like that, the right species, the right time of the year, setting up your drill, making sure that's proper. You might have to change it if it rained, if it didn't rain, if the soil's hard, stuff like that.
We dovetailing with the speakers. Enjoy the challenge.
Yeah.